Maybe your grandmother or perhaps an uncle said to you, "So, what do you want to be when you grow up?" I mean, you were well on your way with your education by then, having just learned to read and all. I mean, if we had all followed through on that commitment, we would be sitting in a room here with ballerinas, firemen, astronauts, and teachers. I remember doing this with lots of groups that I work with. I actually asked them this very same question. What did you want to be when you grew up? And it's pretty funny. They write on a big piece of paper. And when they share with their work colleagues, it becomes very funny. They say things like a race car driver, a fireman, even a hobo. This is pretty funny compared to the real jobs that they do. But it's a really early time, right? Only 5 or 6 years old. How are we supposed to commit to what we're going to do for the rest of our lives? My name is Dana, and I am a change management consultant. Don't worry, my dad didn't know what I did either. I actually work with senior leaders, helping them to develop strategies and make their teams more powerful and work better. And you can imagine, my dad still didn't get it. He was a lawyer. But my grandmother, this isn't what I told her either. In fact, when I was young, I thought I was going to be a veterinarian. I mean, I was one of those kids who loved animals of all sorts. Always trying to get different animals into our house, hamsters, fish, cats. But when our first cat, Peanuts, died, I was so brokenhearted. I didn't think I could ever deal with injured or hurt animals. So I had to choose a different path. I also was very crafty. I mean, I was always doing creative things, thanks to my grandmother and my mother. I was always sewing or knitting or beading things. I mean, if I had had the foresight to know, I could have been the one who founded Etsy. Lost opportunity. So I was also a very voracious reader and a really good writer. In fact, in 7th grade, I wrote a very racy story by 7th grade standards. And it was passed around our class until it was intercepted by Miss Schreiber, our 7th grade teacher. I was pretty mortified because I'd written about things like kissing and making out. I knew nothing about these things, of course, but I had written about them. So I was worried when she handed the story back to me that she was going to lecture me. But instead, she said to me, "This is a very well-written story." So I figured I was probably a pretty good writer. Now, when I look back, most of my childhood, I had spent really trying to not show up, to be invisible. I had a lot of friends who were exactly the opposite. They were the class president and the student body yearbook editor. But I was happy to be around these people, and I loved my small group of friends, but I really didn't want to show up like that. The idea of my name, my face appearing on a poster or somewhere public just mortified me. I couldn't imagine. So I'm going to take you on a journey now. I'll share some stories with you. I think you might be able to relate to some of these stories. I really believe that really we're connected, all of us, and my stories might relate to some of the stories that you have. And at the end, I'll tell you some messages that I would tell my younger self if I had a chance. So when I was in high school, I got to take a psychology class. And our teacher, Mrs. Knight, she was fantastic. She really inspired me with the things that we were learning about people and how they thought. In fact, I learned about something called introverts and extroverts. This helped me understand why I might do some of the things that I did. And in fact, one of our assignments was to ask people that knew us to give us feedback on how they saw us. And in fact, one of my friends explained it to me. I was an introvert. This is why I didn't want to stand out. This is why I liked having my small group of people. And when my friends were all going out, I was happy to just sit home and be by myself. So it's the spring of senior year now, and I get a letter in the mail. The letter says I've won an award. Wait, what award? So I show up that night. I'm with my boyfriend, David. David's a valedictorian and basically a complete overachiever. So David chooses 2 seats on stage in the front row. Seriously? This is not where I want to be sitting. I want to be in the back hiding. But David insists this is where we're going to sit. As I'm sitting there, there's all these eyeballs looking at me, kind of like you're looking at me right now. As they start to announce the awards, one by one, I start getting nervous. Maybe I wasn't supposed to get that letter. Maybe there was a mistake. And then the worst thought of all, what if people think I'm sitting up here just because I want to sit next to my boyfriend? I start feeling the welling of tears in my eyes. I'm so mortified. And then the very last award is announced, and they announce my name. I have received an award for my achievements in my psychology class. And little do I know, this award and this class will change the direction for me. So, I'll admit something to you. I didn't apply to a lot of colleges. I mean, back then, we didn't have reach schools and safety schools. We just applied to where we wanted to go. Generally, it was about 4 or 5 colleges. I mean, my daughter thinks I'm crazy. She applied to 18. I think she was her own kind of overachiever. So I applied to my one college. Yeah, one. I admit that was a little bit stupid. So, thankfully, I got into my one college. We didn't have helicopter parents back then either, so my parents weren't watching over how many applications I was sending out. But thankfully, I got into the one. I was going to UCSD. Yes! So I start my fall quarter. I'm at Revelle College. I'm a psychology major. Now, I look around. All the people who had made me look smart in high school had suddenly disappeared. And now I'm looking pretty darn average. And in fact, I am a very small guppy in a very large ocean. And on top of that, I'm a psychology major in a school full of science and engineering students. I am really out of my element. Now, I loved my psychology classes. They were so much fun, and I loved learning about people and how they operated and how they thought, and it just was so exciting to me. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it, but I loved the classes. And at Revelle, you had to have a minor. So I leveraged the fact that I was a good writer, and I was a literature minor, which, truthfully, saved me. I had been an AP student in high school, so when I came home after that first quarter, I informed my mother that I was an AP student again, but it didn't have quite the same meaning. Academic probation was not a good thing. Literature did help me because I really struggled with the math and science requirements that we had at Revelle College. So I went on and took my psychology classes, and junior year, I knew it was time to find an internship, figure out what I wanted to do. I thought back to high school. I had worked a lot of retail jobs. I really liked shopping, and I certainly loved buying clothes. It seemed like it made perfect sense to work as a retail buyer. So I thought about where I wanted to work, and I decided I wanted to work at Nordstrom. Now, Nordstrom didn't have an internship back then, but I designed one, I pitched it, and they actually hired me as their very first intern. In fact, they were so impressed with what I had pitched to them, they actually hired me too. So I was getting a paid internship in addition to learning what I was going to be learning. I was very excited. I went off to do my internship that summer, along with most of my friends. I was so excited to do the internship, and yet, at the end of the summer, I hated it. It was horrible. I hated the hours, I hated the work, I hated everything about it. So here I am, my last year of college, and everybody else who went off to do their internship seemed to be very directed on what they were going to do. But I was completely lost. I had no idea what I was going to do now. So I graduated, and I would love to tell you I just got a job, but I didn't. I was really lost. I went home, back to the Bay Area. I stayed there for a few weeks, and I realized I really couldn't return back to where I came from. That wasn't going to solve the problem. The train tracks that I had had measured steps of what I was going to do. I was going to go to finish high school, go to college, study psychology, graduate, and then suddenly the train tracks had run out, and I had no idea what I was going to do. So I returned back to San Diego, and I took temp jobs. It was really degrading. I went from one job to another, never feeling like I had any clear direction. I got really depressed. I cried a lot, many times for hours, curled up, crying, sobbing, just wondering what I was going to do. And then I got angry. I got really angry at myself. What was I doing? I was better than this. I have to figure out what I'm going to do. I can't do this for the rest of my life. So I thought about things that I had enjoyed doing. I really had enjoyed the Macintosh. You guys don't know, but it was new back then. So I took some graphic design classes at Extension. I really enjoyed that. It was a very strange time when people were transitioning from hand cutting out things, which sounds bizarre, to doing things electronically on the computer. And I really liked the computer, so that was fun. I also decided to talk to people, to talk to lots of people. As it turns out, there's a name for this. It's called networking. Now, remember, this is before LinkedIn. So I went out and talked to lots of people, and it turns out that people love to talk about what they do. And they love talking about what they like about it. I had so much fun talking to people, just being curious and learning about all of the things that were out there in the world I had never heard of before. I discovered that there was a career where you actually train people in the things that they need to do their jobs. That sounds really interesting. And it meets my need to be with people and kind of applies my psychology degree. But there was just this one teeny tiny problem. I was terrified to speak in front of groups. I mean, terrified. So it looks like if I was going to choose this career, I was going to have to get over my fear. You guys have heard the term fake it till you make it? Yeah, well, that's what I did. I took every opportunity I could to learn to stand in front of people. I took Toastmasters. I developed training courses and trained them to anybody who would listen. I volunteered. And slowly but surely, I grew more confident. I got better. I mean, I'm not fooling myself. I was horrible at the beginning. I can't even imagine what people were thinking. But I did get better, and better, and better. Eventually, I was able to get hired as a training manager. And I was suddenly managing other people as well as doing much more training. And I wasn't thinking about how self-conscious I was anymore. So one day, this is a little further into the future, one day, I tell the group that I used to be afraid to speak to people, to stand up and speak in front of a group. And do you know what they did? They laughed. But they weren't laughing at me, which had been my fear all along. They didn't believe me. So I guess I'd conquered my fear. I'd won. So I'm very lucky because I get to travel all over the world now. I facilitate and train meetings. I speak to groups of people. And I love what I do. I'm a visual practitioner. I actually write down the things that people say in front of them and help them process their thoughts and their ideas. I feel so lucky, like I landed into the perfect career for me. But it wasn't just by accident. I told you I was going to take you on a journey. And you see that the stories I've told you are all about I had to get out of that place of feeling so small, so self-conscious, so insignificant. I had to face things that were scary and do something different because I thought I wanted to be better than that. So it's been a while since college, obviously, just a few years. And I'm happy to say that I worked very hard to make sure my two daughters didn't follow my path. I worked really hard to get them confident and comfortable in themselves. I made sure that they felt like they could stand in front of a group. I did a Toastmasters event and developed a program for middle schoolers, a time when you're really, really self-conscious about standing in front of groups, and had them practice over and over because that's really what it takes. I'm so proud of the very confident young women that they have become. When I saw my daughter running for an office in high school, I just wanted to say, right on. She did it, and she did it much before her mom did. I was so, so proud of her. So I can't go back and do it over. I mean, my messages to my younger self are really for you. And here would be the messages I would share. Number one, get comfortable being uncomfortable. There's so many things out there that you haven't ever tried or explored. And if you're not trying and failing, you're not engaged. You're not in there. Just try things. Things are always changing. Create your own story of who you are. Who knows what will be coming in the next 5 years? You have to try things and see who you are rather than what other people may think that you are. And the third, be courageous enough to be seen. You remember that scared young me sitting on the stage, afraid and feeling small? I realized that person wasn't serving me. I wanted to be better than that. I wanted to be bigger. So I invite you to think, what would be the messages you would want to tell to your younger self? Thank you.